رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. اللهم فقهنا في الدين وعلمنا التأويل وألهمنا رشدنا يا رب العالمين. Alhamdulillah, in our lessons on Mukhtasar al-Quduri from the section on transactions, we are continuing to look at Kitab al-Ghasb. At the end of last class, we introduced the subject of Kitab al-Ghasb and of misappropriation, and we looked at many of the underlying considerations of taking another's property without permission, or using another's property without permission, or maintaining another's property without permission, right? And we will see as we go through this and subsequent chapters the difference between misappropriation and theft, right? And that's a question for you to think about, and we want to get you thinking about these issues. So one of the ways we learn how to think about issues is, contrast the definition of ghasb with the definition of sariqa, and you'll see some very interesting insights, right? You'll see some very interesting insights. This is a very good example of something we've been reiterating, that fiqh books are not manuals of suggested conduct, right? Fiqh books are not manuals for suggested conduct. For somebody to build an understanding of sound conduct, they need to join between fiqh and hadith and akhlaq and tasawwuf, right? And the works of adab, etc. But broadly, these three areas: fiqh and hadith and akhlaq and tasawwuf, coupled with a consistent reading of the Quran that gives them a sense of the framework of divine guidance and what Allah is calling His servants to, right? In that, this is just, fiqh lays out, the signposts on that roadmap, right? It's not telling you how you should act necessarily, right? So here too, Kitab al-Ghasb. قال الإمام القدوري رحمه الله تعالى: ومن غصب شيئا مما له مثل فهلك في يده فعليه ضمان مثله. Whoever misappropriates something of that which has a mithl, right? And there's technical terms for this in English. We're not interested in looking at English of anything that has a like, right? And it perishes in their hands. فَعَلِيهِ ضَمَانُ مِثْلِهِ, right? They have to compensate with the like of it. لأن لما فيه من مراعاة الصورة بالجنس والمعنى بالمالية, right? And this is a general principle, right? الضمان بالمثل وإلا فبالقيمة, right? So if you misappropriate something that has a similar and it is destroyed in their hands, they have to compensate with the like of it. So you took someone's tablet and without permission, right? And it perishes in your hand. This is what they call yadu daman, right? Al-yad yadu daman or yadu amana, right? Right? Yad al-aman and yad al-daman, right? If you have something with permission, right? And so for example, if you borrowed someone's tablet and it perishes in your hands, what is the ruling?
It depends what your ruling was pertaining to that. If you were if you were like a wali, then it would be different. But if
No, in general, you borrowed something from someone.
Then it would be an amana, and you would not be liable for it unless there was ta'addi.
Yeah, ta'addi or taqsir. Good. Very good, Sidi. Right? So if you borrow something, the yad is yad amana. Right? So there isn't, generally, but there are tafasil. We talked early in Kitab al-Buyu' about Sawm al-Shira and Sawm al-Nadar with a sin. Right? And if you're reviewing properly, that should be very familiar. Right? But generally, if you borrow something, there's no daman unless there is ta'addi or taqsir. There's no, you don't have to compensate for it unless there is transgression or negligence. But ghasb, right? The yad of the ghasib is yadu daman, right? Why? Because if you borrowed something, you took it with the person's permission, actual or effective, right? So it's an amana. You just have to not have shortcoming with respect to the amana. Of course, what's understood from this is that man ghasaba shay'an, there's an implicit logical breakdown of this. Man ghasaba shay'an mimma lahu mithl fahalaka fa'alayhi ad-daman. Right? What's the first ruling of the ghasab? يعني من غصب شيئا يجب رده. Right? That's of course the first thing. Right? It's رد is واجب وإبقاؤه إثم. Right? Right? And there's, the Prophet ﷺ said about matlul ghani dhulm, delaying repaying someone who's not in need of the wealth of is wrongdoing. That's an amazing hadith. Matlul ghani with a ta, matlul ghani dhulm. It's an amazing hadith because the idafa matlul ghani, the delay, mumatala is delaying, right? So the one who is able for them to delay repayment is dhulm. Or delaying repayment even to someone who doesn't need the thing is dhulm, because it's their haqq. So that idafa could be lil fa'il or lil maf'ul. Matlul ghani dhulm. And you can see the hadith. But here, the basis is that you return what you stole. If it perishes, then what you stole, if it has a like, you give something that's like it and has the same value as it. Right? فَضَمَانُ مِثْلِهِ. يعني مراعاة يعني من مراعاة الصورة بالجنس والمعنى بالمالية. Right? Otherwise, what's due is the qima. Right? Right? وإن كان مما لا مثل له فعليه قيمته. And if it's something that is unique, right? It doesn't have similars, then one has to give its qima. Because, so for example, what's something that doesn't have a mithl?
Old cars, or vintage cars.
Perhaps, but the basis of cars is laha mithl, right? So possibly, like some like an antique, like that. In the marketplace, you can only readily find one equivalent thing, right? That has, that's similar, and the sign of it being similar is that they would be similarly valued, right? Now, legally, if you lost someone's used shoes, you could get them equivalent used shoes. That's adl. But there's a basic ma'roof, which is you substitute it with something that's new, right? And that can cause problems as well, right? As is obvious. And that's where the mithl, if it's something used, would be what was its value at the time of the halak or at the time of when the dispute took place. Not its original value, right? So for example, you have a pair of wireless, of in-ear wireless headphones. Now, when these are brand new, they'd be worth a certain amount. But after being used and, something's been in someone's ear for 6 months, is it worth the same right now as it was worth when it was purchased? Right? But of course, those furu', that's where, we study multiple texts to get those details. Okay. So, Ghasb, first ruling is Radd. Right? إن لم يهلك فيجب الرد. إن هلك فالضمان بالمثل أو إن تعذر المثل فالقيمة. Of course, and this goes back to the principle of يدفع الضرر بقدر الإمكان. Right? يدفع الضرر بقدر الإمكان. Harm is lifted to the extent possible, right? There's half a dozen main principles related to darar. You can find all of them, well, the major ones in the Majalla, right? And I'd request that each of you write out the Qawa'id al-Darar yourselves, individually, by hand, from the Majalla. Right? Find the Qawa'id al-Darar and write them out. And you can refer to a short commentary to the extent that it helps you understand those qawa'id. Okay. And we can talk about that separately. Okay. Of course, if the person agrees something has a mithl, in radiya bil qima fabiha. Right? So, you saw someone's battery pack and you're like, cool. So you took it without permission. And you dropped it and it exploded. Could you plug this in? It wasn't going to explode. There's a USB-C 3 plug in it. So, those are separate things, right? They could excuse you, etc. But, how much do you have to settle on? بِمِثْلِهِ, any dispute, how is dispute lifted between two parties? بِالتَّرَاضِي, they agree. But تَرَاضِي إِلَّا أَن تَكُونَ تِجَارَةً عَنْ تَرَاضِي. Right? So now, and ghasb is a type of exchange. Why? because you took something that's another's. Right? So either you give it back. So there's two parties in Ghasb. Al-Ghasib wal-Maghsub minhu, right? So you took something without permission. Now they have a right to something from you. Primarily they have the right to the thing back, and then the transaction's complete with repentance and an apology. Or what's due. Now how do we set that this is a mithl? Because it gets tricky. How do we set that it is in fact a mithl? Mutual agreement. Can I impose, right, a mithl on somebody else that this is the same thing? Khalas. No, you can't. Right? At least you have to take the means of taradi. Right? And we've talked about, if you don't have that, then you get a mediator, an adjudicator, or you can take it to court. Right? But someone doesn't have wilaya on another person and these kinds of things, just like that, right? وإن كان مما لا مثل له فعليه قيمته, right? وعلى الغاصب رد العين المغصوبة, right? And the duty, وعلى, على is used for شروط and ما فيه إلزام. على كذا is for شروط, like when, if you remember in عقد البيع, اشتريت هذا على أن أدفع الثمن بعد شهر, right? Etc. Right? على الغاصب رد العين المغصوبة, because otherwise what could someone do? Right? You take the thing and say, I'm going attached to this cat. So here's its market value. Can you do that? The answer is absolutely not, right? Because لا يخفى ما فيه من المفاسد. Right? So see, Zayn comes wearing a turban to Seekers, and some brother called Alif, right? See Hamza's cousin, Alif. They're a family, Hamza, Alif, and Wasl, right? And so Alif takes Hamza's turban and puts it in storage somewhere. It says, here's $50. لا يجوز. You can be taken to court for that, right? Right? And there's another thing, and it's a small fleeting thing in mention, but it's very important not to miss this. He says, في مكان غصبها ما دامت قائمة, from the place where you misappropriated from. And this applies similarly if you borrowed something, you have to give it back where you borrowed it from. People sometimes get this weird idea, say, come and pick it up. You borrowed the thing from Zayn, now Zayn has to come and pick it up from you, right? Right? And that is not permissible, right? That's dhulm, right? If the other person agrees to come pick it up from you, but you have to be wary of عدم الرضا باطنا. They may disagree because they think that's the only way they can get their haqq, but one has to be very careful about that, right? فإن ادعى هلاكها, but if the one who misappropriated the thing claims that the item is ruined, حبسه الحاكم حتى يعلم أنها لو كانت باقية أظهرها. If the person claims that it has perished, But of course, there's something that is implicit, which is what? وَلَمْ يَقْبَلْ. Right? Because of course, this is all, the asl is taradi. Right? 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 The person didn't. Because otherwise, if we could just لَا يُعْطَى النَّاسُ بِدَعْوَاهُم, if people were just granted whatever they claim, what would happen? لَدَّعَى النَّاسِ لَدَّعَى رِجَالٌ أَمْوَالَ قَوْمٍ وَدِمَاءَهُم. Right? لكن البينة على المدعي واليمين على من أنكر. Right? The hadith in the Arba'in. And if by now you guys haven't memorized the Arba'in, please, let's wake up. Right? عليها مدار الإسلام. So, فإن ادعى هلاكه, claim that it's perished. Now if the person believes him, صدقه. Then خلاص. The basis is that disputes be resolved between the two parties, if it's possible. If it's not, then it's escalated. The person says, no, I don't accept this claim. Then the hakim would have a right to detain the person حتى يعلم صدقه, until they know, until the judge says, well, if he did have it, he would have brought it. Right? If he did have it, he would have brought it. Right? Until they know. Of course, ilm, the basis of ilm is that it's used for what is certain. Right? Ilm refers to what is certain. That's the asl. Which is why he explains what's meant by ilm by saying, يعني حتى يعلم صدقه ويغلب على ظنه. That you're reasonably sure, because you can't be certain. Right? And very often the later ulama put criteria for this. Right? They put criteria. ما يحصل به غلبة الظن. That reasonable surety occurs at such and such time. Right? Just to regulate things. To regulate things. That if the item was still in the person's possession, they would have brought it forth. Right? Because people use this as a loophole. They wanted things, right? And also because some things have a market value and they have an emotional value, right, for somebody. Now, what is due? So let's say two cousins who don't get along, both used to ride a horse. Like it used to be a pony. Now they don't get along. Now, the older cousin purchased the pony, but they're both attached to the pony. The fact that two people love this, although the pony became a horse, love this horse, does that affect the market price of the horse? Okay? So let's say the market price of the horse is $1,000. I don't know if that's a regular price or not, but let's say, but for them the horse means more than a fancy car. Right? Right? So I'll just take it, hide it, for a year and bring it back. Of course, diyanatan, that's not allowed, right? But and ultimately, of course, al-qada yakun ala al-zahir, right? Qada, your legal judgment, is necessarily deficient because you can't completely control the realities of things. ثم قضى عليه ببدلها. Then the qadi makes judgment that you have to give its replacement, whether the mithl or the qima, right? Because in تعذر رد العين يصار إلى المثل ثم إلى القيمة. That's the tertib. You must return the thing itself. When not possible, you return the like of it. When that's not possible, then you return the market value. Okay. Then you have والغصب فيما ينقل ويحول. Right? Misappropriation only takes place in things that are transferable and movable. Because how can, right? وإذا غصب عقارا, if someone misappropriated property, right? فهلك في يده, and it perished in their hands, right? This is بآفة سماوية, right? Because they do say there's halaka, it perished, and then there's a separate thing if there's ta'addi. So aqar will include, there's a building, someone misappropriated a building. How? Owner traveled. They moved in and they squatted on someone's property. And there was a tornado and the building was destroyed. That's afa samawiyya. Right? Or there's a flood. كغلبة السيل. Right? A flood. Whoosh, wiped it away. لم يضمنه عند أبي حنيفة وأبي يوسف. It does not have to be compensated for according to Abu Hanifa and Abu Yusuf. Because the reality of Ghasb did not take place. How did the reality of Ghasb did not take place? Did you take the thing? Right? Did you take the thing? No. Right? Because the thing is exactly where it was. The property is exactly where it was. Now, if you destroyed it, you have to pay for the damages of what you destroyed. That's a separate matter. Right? وقال محمد يضمنه. But Imam Muhammad said one has to compensate for it, right? Because it's in your hand, right? And it goes back to how they defined ghasb slightly differently, right? And that's discussed in the works of Khilaf. They said that in waqf, in general, يختار ما هو أنفع للوقف. In waqf, generally, it's a guiding principle. It's not an absolute criteria. One chooses that which is of greater benefit to the waqf itself, which entails that in waqf they took the opinion of Imam Muhammad, and also because awqaf would frequently be abused by people, right? So there is, just outside the town, there's an orphanage. Someone hires a few thugs, they kick out the orphans. And then the building collapses due to a rainstorm or whatever. It has to be. So there the opinion of Muhammad would apply. وما نقص منه بفعله كهدمه وسكناه ضمنه في قولهم جميعا. But anything that diminishes value due to the person's actions, the ghasib, the misappropriator's actions, then or by their using the item without permission, then that has to be compensated to the extent of the damage or the wear and tear. Right? And that's also in ijar, there's the issues of what is due upon the person renting, right? And what is due upon, right? Because the one renting is renting with permission. So wear and tear, regular wear and tear, do they have to compensate for it? So let's say, we all moved to rural New Mexico, and we are living in a mud. So I'm living in a mud house owned by Sidi Hamza. Now, every year there are rains and so on, so I'm renting his house. Would a mud house have wear and tear? Let's say it does. 5 years later, I hand over the keys to the mud house. Do I have to pay for the wear and tear? No. Because that which relates to the maintenance of the home goes upon the person. And there are texts related to where, and you can find them in the Majalla, the criteria of wear and tear with rental. And I'd encourage you to look for those. But anyways, but that's different because I'm using, Sidi Hamza gave me permission to use it, and if there's wear and tear, he owns it. And he owns it. If I wasn't using it, he might be using it. But the wear and tear goes back to the owner, the regular wear and tear, as opposed to damages resulting from my usage, right? I put holes in the wall, I punched the wall and there's a big bump in it, whatever, that's a different thing. So there's criteria for that. But here, this usage is without permission, right? This usage is without permission. So I have to compensate both for if it's destroyed or by the wear and tear. According to all three of our imams, right? وإذا هلك المغصوب في يد الغاصب بفعله أو بغير فعله فعليه ضمانه. Right? If the item that was misappropriated perished in the hands of the ghasib, the misappropriator, they have to compensate for it, whether or not it was by their doing or not. How? Someone took my tablet, right? Without permission. And they put it somewhere else, right? Right? And it's not an unsafe place, right? They put it in their car. And the car got stolen. Do I have to look for the thief to ask for my thing back too? No. Who would I demand compensation for my tablet from? The one who took it, because they locked their car and everything. But whether it's by their بفعله بتعد أو تقصير or بغير فعله. If someone took something and there was an afa samawiyya, there was some natural disaster and the thing got ruined. the misappropriating party has to compensate for it. Right? وإن نقص في يده فعليه ضمان النقصان. And if it diminishes in value in their hands, they have to compensate for the diminishment of value, right? To the extent of the diminishment, right? Whether there was ta'addi or not. Right? Whether there was ta'addi or not. Right? Now, وَمَنْ ذَبَحَ الشَّاةَ غَيْرِهِ. If someone slaughtered another person's sheep. Now, could you slaughter another person's sheep without their permission? Can you? Can you slaughter someone else's sheep without their permission?
Generally, no.
When could you do it?
She was starving and they went around.
Yeah, I mean, if there is necessity, right? So you know, Zubair decided to try his hand at farming, right? And someone sold him a plot of land that has no access to water. Poor guy, he's living in a farm and there's no water. He's dying. The next door neighbor is gone and they have one sheep that they left behind. So if they slaughtered it without permission to save their own life, the action remains what it is, but that's akhaffu ad-dararain. It's the lesser of two harms. But if there's an alternative, you sit by the roadside waiting for someone to come, whatever, you have to take the means of avoiding that, right? And there's a bunch of things, and this is why the qawa'id al-fiqhiyya, inshallah, is something that we will touch upon, but it's good if you're ever bored, you know, reading the qawa'id of the majalla is a good way of nerdy legal entertainment. Not entertainment, like study. Because there's a lot of wisdom and benefit there as well. So, right? وَانْدَبَحَ شَاةَ غَيْرِهِ فَمَلِكُهَا بِالْخِيَارِ. Someone slaughters the sheep of another, right? Or their cow or whatever. فَمَلِكُهَا بِالْخِيَارِ. The owner of the cattle has a choice. If they wish, they would seek from them the price of the sheep right? ضمنه قيمتها وسلمها إليه. Right? وإن شاء ضمنه نقصانها. Right? Right? If you wish, you have two choices. ضمنه قيمتها. You could demand the price of the animal itself, but then you'd have to let the misappropriator keep the meat. Right? وإن شاء ضمنه نقصانها. Or say, no, I will keep the meat. You'd bred a Wagyu, you know, an Ontario Wagyu cow or whatever grade A whatever grade, A4, A5, whatever, highest grade Wagyu beef, right? So someone came and slaughtered your premium cow that you nurtured and fed, whatever you feed a Wagyu cow, right? Now you wanted that meat. You had planned out what you're going to do with each part. So what do? You can keep that meat, and the loss of value between the meat and the and the animal itself, you could demand it from the person. وَمَنْ خَرَقَ ثَوْبَ غَيْرِهِ خَرْقًا يَسِيرًا ضَمِنَ نُقْصَانَهُ. If someone damages the garment of another with a minor damage, they compensate for the diminishment of its value. Right? And this is what is considered ta'addi. Right? Somebody was pouring Turkish coffee, but they noticed one of the ulama come in and you poured it all over someone's dress pants and they got ruined. That's ta'addi, because if you're doing some work, you have to pay attention, right? So that's not in any way excusable, right? So in that, if there's a diminishment of value, then you have to pay for that diminishment. But also, of course, it's your right to demand that, and it's your recommendation to overlook, particularly if it wasn't deliberate, etc., right? But you cannot demand virtue from another person. So someone who takes their right and then you think ill of them, that is sinful. You talk ill of them, that is sin upon sin. Right? Right? وإن خرق خرقا كثيرا يبطل عامة منفعته فلمالكه أن يضمنه جميع قيمته. If the garment is damaged significantly, and Imam Quduri says, in a manner that negates its general benefit, then the owner has the right to be compensated for its full value. Right? Because it is like ruining it. Right? So he says, عامة منفعته, the general benefit, right? What's meant by general benefit here, right? Imam al-Marghinani in the Hidayah disagreed with the expression of Quduri. Others said that the expression of al-Quduri, of Imam al-Quduri, could be understood in a manner that corresponds to the sound understanding, right? But a major, al-kharq al-fahish, a major blemish, so the author of the Lubab quotes al-Marghinani, right, rahimahullah ta'ala, Shaykh al-Islam, Burhan al-Din al-Marghinani, that a major blemish, al-fahish, right, is ما يفوت بعض العين, is that which destroys some of the thing itself. وجنس المنفعة, right? And جنس المنفعة and the منفعة. And the commentator said المنفعة المقصودة, right? The primary benefit. So for example, if it's a dress shirt, a white dress shirt, and you spilled coffee on the front, and it's a stain that can't be removed. Say, well, wear it at home. But a dress shirt, is it made to be worn at home? Right, if it's a dress shirt, what else are you going to do? Do people normally wear a dress shirt when they're going for a walk in the park? No. So there, you need to compensate. عامة منفعته المقصودة, the primary benefit of something, right? وإذا تغيرت العين المقصودة بفعل الغاصب حتى زال اسمها وأعظم منافعها زال ملك المغصوب منه عنها وملكها الغاصب وضمنها. If the item that was misappropriated changes in the hands of the misappropriator such that it no longer has the same name anymore, and its primary use no longer exists. So this is effectively destroyed. It's now no longer considered to belong to the misappropriating party. So it's no longer considered to belong to the original owner, and the ghasib, the one who misappropriated it, has to compensate for it in full. Right? ولم يحل له الانتفاع بها حتى يؤدي بدلها. But it is not permissible. It is not permissible for the ghasib, for the misappropriator, to use that item that has been significantly changed until they have paid, have compensated the person. Right? Otherwise, it would cause all kinds of damage to people. وهذا, and this needs an example. كمن غصب شاة, like someone who misappropriated a sheep, فذبحها, and slaughtered it, وشواها, and then barbecued it, أو طبخها, or cooked it. I'd say, these kebabs belong to you. Khalas, I've paid you back. No. Who do the kebabs belong to? The misappropriator. But you can't eat the kebabs until you have paid the person. Yeah, but they'll go cold. Reheat them, man. Tough. Right? أو حنطة فطحنها, or there's wheat and you طحن, what you huh? Yeah, you made طحن of it, you milled it. أو حديدا, or there's metal, فاتخذه سيفا, someone had bars of iron, you took them, made them a sword. They say, here, this is your sword. No, the sword is yours, you cannot use it until you've paid for it. And someone is known to do things like this, they could be taken to court, because then they are harming people, right? This is if someone, the assumption is that ghasb could have happened by mistake. The ghasb is a sin, but the ghasib is not necessarily a sinner. right? Because it could be, mistaken, whatever. أو صفرا فعمله آنية, right? Sufr is what?
Brass.
Yeah, brass, and someone turned it into a container. Right? And if these things cause problem, then it becomes a situation where this would be the hukum, and the fatwa can change. وإذا غصب فضة أو ذهبا فضربها دراهم أو دنانير أو آنية لم يزل ملك مالكها عند أبي حنيفة. Right? Now gold and silver, their value is the gold and silver. So according to Abu Hanifa, right, if someone misappropriates gold, silver, or gold, and someone turns it into dirhams or dinars or into a vessel, then the money, the dirhams and the dinars, the gold and silver coins, the silver and gold coins, or the vessel, that itself belongs to the owner, according to Abu Hanifa, right? So they take them, and because this could well add value to it, but that's not considered, right? Right? And the hidayah, right? The hidayah indicates Imam al-Marghinani indicates taking the position of Imam Abu Hanifa on this, because he mentions the dalil of the Imam second. And the basis is the hidayah. In the hidayah, Imam al-Marghinani makes tarjih of the opinion that whose reasoning he mentions second. And this is confirmed by him answering the evidence of the Sahibain. And this is also chosen in the other mutun. Al-Mahbubi and Al-Nasafi and Al-Mawsili and Sadr al-Sharia. وَمَنْ غَصَبَ سَاجَةً. Right? What's saj? It's a type of wood. Where do you find that? Where do you look for it? Right? It's a type of precious wood, right? That grows only in India. Anyone look up its name?
Some Indian oak or teak.
Is that what? Where do you find that?
It's from Lane's lexicon.
Good. Right? These kinds of things. Lane's lexicon generally relies on classical dictionaries, right? So, it's for things like this because often these kinds of words will be given precedence over Hans Wehr, because Hans Wehr focuses on modern Arabic, right? And although Hans Wehr is very useful, but okay. So whoever misappropriates some wood, فَبَنَى عَلَيْهَا, and builds with it, right? And the assumption is that the value of the building is more than the value of the wood. زَالَ مِلْكُ مَالِكِهَا عَنْهَا, right? The owner of the wood no longer owns the wood. وَلَزِمَ الْغَاصِبَ قِيمَتُهَا, and the misappropriator must pay for the qima, the material value of what they misappropriated, right? And it's a separate thing. Someone who does things like that, there could be discretionary punishment for, that's a separate matter. And this is just between the two. Someone's known they do these kinds of things, there could be, a ta'zir for these kinds of crimes, right? So here we're talking about what's the right of A over B. Now, if it becomes that something is criminal, there could be a separate thing, and that's, right? ومن بنى أرضا فغرس فيها أو بنى قيل له اقلع الغرس والبناء وردها فارغة. Whoever misappropriates some land and plants on the land or builds on the land, they're told, pluck what you planted and demolish what you built and return the land to its owner empty as you took it. فإن كانت الأرض تنقص بقلع ذلك. But if the land would diminish in value by plucking what was planted on it, فللمالك أن يضمن قيمة البناء والغرس مقلوعا. Then the owner has the right to compensate the misappropriator for the price of the building. Because the building, what does it do? It adds value to the land. Right? Someone planted trees. So the owner is gone from the land. So it's an empty land. Right? So Zubair, when Zubaydah said no, he went and bought a plot of empty land. But turns out he didn't buy it. Because Zubaydah had gone, so he got slightly delusional for all. He thought he bought the land. He didn't. He just imagined it. He was just using someone else's land, having imagined that he purchased it. So he was living on it. He built a house. He planted trees. 10 years passed. The trees became a whole forest, and there's a whole ecosystem. Now, if we plucked all of that out, it's going to damage the property, right? So the owner has a choice. What's the choice? Either say, no, okay, Zubair, demolish your building, but does the building add value to the land? Yes. And this idea of la darar, there's no harming, wala dirar, nor reciprocating harm. Right? There's no harm, one doesn't accept harm, and does not harm another. Right? And it could be a mistake, right? Like even with the ghasib, do we assume ill intent, etc.? Intent is a separate thing. Right? Zubair could be waham, delusion. Doesn't excuse. Objectively, the land, if it's established that even Zubair admits, yeah, I admit I didn't buy the land. It was a delusion. The owner says, but if you remove that land, there'll be whatever, it was built in a way that's going to damage the property. The owner could the ruling here would be that the owner can pay the cost of the building and the value of the trees, the qima, the market value, right? And to give that, but now there's a thing. that does he have to pay for the value of the building as it is? No. Because he has a right to the land. That's why, what's the key term in the matan here? Maqlu'an. On its own. So what's the value of the building? Because you put a $2 million home. Say, the market value of the home is $2 million. No. The value of the items there. It's not the value of the whole forest. Someone, if you want to buy a forest, got mango trees, and Zubair went fancy. He learned how to grow passion fruit in rural Ontario, right? Or whatever, like really precious fruits and coconuts and God knows what. No, what will be the value of those trees or the plants? Maqlu'an, plucked. Right? That's important. So just be the cost of the items that were added, not the resultant market value, because that resulting market value, Zubair didn't have a right to, because he built it on someone else's land. The actual value of a whole forest and orchards and so on, but it's built on land that's not yours. So just, if we were to pluck that, what would this sell for? Right? On its own, not because trees have an ongoing value, but they have an ongoing value on the basis of the land that's below them. Right? And that's explained in the commentary, you can see. Right? Then there's a few more issues. We'll stop here. And there's masail of ziyada. Right? Right? And there's ziyada muttasila and ziyada munfasila. Right? And the Majalla discusses this, so someone has himma, they can look for it there. So we'll look at Ghasb, that will finish Ghasb next class, and then move on to wadi'a, to something given in safe keeping. And then ariya, or i'ara, which is lending. Right? So we'll continue from there. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Any questions?